The path of the Omnissiah has left humanity dithering in the darkness, incapable of advancing on the paths of knowledge. Embracing the warp reveals technology that the primitives on Mars could never dream of wielding. Magos Kane of the Fivefold Path. The Imperium of Man is a colossal and authoritarian entity built on an intricate framework of strict laws and doctrines aimed at safeguarding humanity and maintaining order. However, the very institutions charged with enforcing these laws often find themselves engaged in significant violations, creating a paradox where the enforcement of regulations actually fosters heretical behavior. Among these institutions, the Adeptus Mechanicus stands out, particularly in its role as a breeding ground for the Dark Mechanicum, a faction that embodies the consequences of the Imperium's inconsistencies. Imperial law is intended to be absolute, guiding the myriad factions of the Imperium. The Codex Imperialis outlines a comprehensive legal framework meant to prevent deviation from the Emperor's will. However, the expansion of the Imperium introduces complexities, leading to loopholes, exceptions, and misinterpretations that undermine the integrity of these laws. The Adeptus Mechanicus, tasked with preserving humanity's technological legacy, is especially notorious for its selective adherence to these regulations, often placing its own interests above the Imperium's. One of the most significant examples of the Mechanicus's disregard for imperial law lies in its engagement with forbidden knowledge and technology. While the Codex strictly forbids the use of Xenos technology and the pursuit of heretical information, the Mechanicus frequently flouts these prohibitions. For instance, their experiments with dark tech during the Age of Technology exemplify their blatant disregard for the Emperor's edicts. Despite clear prohibitions, the Mechanicus sought out Xenos artifacts, justifying their actions as necessary for humanity's technological superiority. This hypocrisy raises questions about the true cost of power and the lengths to which the Mechanicus will go to achieve its goals. Furthermore, the veneration of machine spirits by the Mechanicus directly contradicts the Imperium's monotheistic beliefs. By attributing sentience to machines, the Mechanicus fosters interpretations of the Emperor's will that deviate from established doctrine. This creates an environment ripe for heresy and invites factions like the Dark Mechanicum to emerge, embracing these heretical interpretations and further straying from the core tenets of the Imperium. Moreover, the hypocrisy surrounding the enforcement of imperial law generates internal conflict within the Mechanicus itself. The constant exceptions made for specific groups lead to resentment and dissent among tech priests. This discontent can result in splinter factions that challenge the authority of the Mechanicus and, by extension, the Imperium. The rise of the Dark Mechanicum serves as a prime example of how these internal fractures can lead to larger-scale heretical movements. The existence of the Dark Mechanicum can be traced directly to the exceptions made within the Adeptus Mechanicus. When the Mechanicus operates outside the established legal framework, it not only fosters an environment conducive to heresy, but also creates a precedent for others to follow. The Dark Mechanicum represents a culmination of these deviations, a faction that fully embraces the use of forbidden technologies and the worship of chaos. These renegade tech priests, once members of the Mechanicus, now operate in the shadows, having abandoned the worship of the Omnissiah. They are drawn to the allure of power and knowledge, often seeking out ancient and forbidden technologies that the Mechanicus has deemed unacceptable. The Dark Mechanicum's practices, including the development of heretical devices and the use of Xenos technology, stand in stark contrast to the original intentions of the Imperium. The Dark Mechanicum, often mistakenly called the Dark Mechanicus and self-identified as the New Mechanicum, is a faction of traitorous tech priests. These individuals, part of the Collegia Titanica and Chaos Knights from the original Mechanicum, have turned into heretics in their allegiance to chaos. As the Great Crusade came to an end and the horrific galactic conflict known as the Horus Heresy erupted in the early 31st millennium, these tech priests pledged their loyalty to the War Master Horus and the Chaos Gods. Following the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, which resulted in a costly victory for the Imperium, The forces of chaos that had served Horus were driven towards the Eye of Terror during the brutal military campaigns remembered as the Great Scouring. The renegade tech priests of the Dark Mechanicum were also forced from Mars by the revitalized loyalists within the fledgling Adeptus Mechanicus. These renegades escaped the Imperium, retreating to the galaxy's far reaches, with some seeking refuge in the Eye of Terror. Over the centuries, their numbers grew, incorporating later Mechanicus heretics, who chose to follow the path of forbidden technological heresy. In their exile, the Dark Mechanicum became increasingly entranced by the warp's power and heretical technologies. When the Age of Strife ended in the 30th millennium, the Emperor of Mankind aimed to fulfill his vision of human unity in a galaxy rife with hostility. He recognized the need to unite all of humanity under one banner, especially after the destructive emergence of the Chaos God Slanesh in the 30th millennium reopened the galaxy to warp travel and communication. Employing genetically modified warriors that foreshadowed the creation of the first Space Marines, he quickly asserted his dominance on old Earth, reuniting the fragmented nations of humanity's birthplace during the Unification Wars. With his newly formed Space Marine legions at the helm of his expeditionary fleets, the Emperor set forth on his great crusade into the void. When the Emperor first arrived on Mars, seeking an alliance with the influential cult Mechanicus, the tech priests recognized a kindred spirit in him, a scientist who valued the power of machines and technological advancement. As word spread of the technological divinity embodied by this enigmatic golden warrior, some tech priests began to see the Emperor as a physical manifestation of their own machine god, the Omnissiah. In the 739th year of the 30th millennium, the Emperor solidified an alliance with the ancient Mechanicum through the Treaty of Mars, marking the foundation of the Imperium of Man. In exchange for providing the necessary materials for his armies and constructing a formidable war fleet in the orbital shipyards of Mars' Ring of Iron for his campaign to reunite the stars, the Emperor promised to safeguard the tech priests, respecting the autonomy of their forge worlds and their freedom to practice their faith. This promise of protection came despite the official atheism of the imperial truth that the Emperor aimed to propagate across the newborn Imperium. To the inhabitants of Mars, the Omnissiah had transformed into a real entity, a golden figure who had walked upon the planet's crimson surface. However, a small faction among the tech priests viewed the Emperor as a false god who had enslaved the Martian priesthood with deceit. This lingering resentment simmered for the next 2 centuries, eventually boiling over into a violent rebellion against this perceived false deity. These dissenters believed the Emperor had arrived on Mars under the guise of the Omnissiah, portraying himself as a false god leading a conquering army. They perceived the peace he offered the Mechanicum as an illusion, a ruse to mask a more sinister reality. In their eyes, the Emperor extended peace with one hand while concealing a dagger behind his back with the other. In truth, the Emperor's proposition was an ultimatum: join me, or I will take what I need from you. Faced with such a stark choice, the tech priests found themselves coerced into relinquishing Mars' autonomy, reducing the sacred red planet to little more than a vassal of Terra, its ancient rival during the Age of Technology. After the signing of the Treaty of Mars, 2 Terran centuries passed, and Kelbahal emerged as a prominent figure within the Mechanicum. He became the Fabricator General of Mars, overseeing the mightiest forged city on the planet, Olympus Mons. The rise of such an ambitious and duplicitous individual to the forefront of the Mechanicum is regarded as one of the great tragedies in imperial history. Scholars are astounded that someone as gifted as Kelbahal could be misguided enough to lead such a formidable institution into the realms of heresy and rebellion. Although he had much to be proud of, having unearthed more of humanity's lost technological secrets than anyone before him, and overseeing a record surge in production quotas, the pride he once felt had been eroded, replaced by cold, synthetic reasoning as more of his organic mind was supplanted by cybernetic enhancements. During this tumultuous period leading up to Horus's open rebellion against the Emperor, discontent thrived on Mars. Tensions simmered between the various Mechanicum magi who governed the planet, punctuated by outbreaks of espionage and violence across the forged cities, the primary socio-political units of Mars. There were even whispers that the Titan legions of the Collegia Titanica had already chosen sides in anticipation of impending conflict. At the onset of the Horus heresy, Warmaster Horus dispatched Regulus, a Mechanicum representative who had allied himself with Horus, to Mars to seek the Fabricator General's support for his rebellion. Initially skeptical, Kelbohal recalled the Emperor's visit to his forge more than 2 centuries prior, and the necessity he felt to submit to his authority. The once mighty Terran tribe's leader had made grand promises of shared power in his conquests. Yet that promised equality had never materialized in the eyes of Kelbohal. While the Mechanicum labored tirelessly across the galaxy's forge worlds to supply the Emperor's armies with weapons, they received little more than empty platitudes in return. Although Kelbohal recognized Horus as a man of vision, he sought more than mere words. Regulus informed the Fabricator General that much had transpired since the Emperor had departed the expeditionary fleets, after the success of the Ulanor Crusade, during which Horus had been installed as Warmaster and granted command over the Great Crusade. He assured Kelbohal that alliances had shifted and new powers had emerged, ready to assist those who possessed the vision to see them. Horus Lupercal was one such figure, now undeniably an ally of the Mechanicum. When the moment came to strike against the Emperor and his Imperium, Horus promised to be a friend to Mars, provided the Fabricator General pledged his loyalty and redirected his manufacturing capabilities to the traitor cause. Horus also demanded that Kelbohal suppress any dissent among his fellow tech priests to ensure that the Warmaster's forces could advance their bid for dominance within the Sol system without the threat of a counterattack. Any factions loyal to Terra had to be subdued or eliminated before the Warmaster's troops set foot in the Sol system. The Fabricator General conveyed to Regulus that the Warmaster had already placed considerable demands upon him and the Mechanicum. They had delivered on their obligations by prioritizing the supply of materials and weapons to the Warmaster's favored expeditionary fleets of the Great Crusade, while intentionally delaying shipments to those not aligned with him. However, the Mechanicum had no intention of merely trading one tyrant for another. Regulus reassured Kelbohal that the Warmaster had vowed to restore the Martian Empire to its former splendor and promised to withdraw all non-Mechanicum forces from the Forge Worlds once the Emperor was overthrown. To alleviate the Fabricator General's concerns, the Warmaster pledged to share the lost secrets of ancient standard template construct technology, recently recovered from the worlds of the Oretian technocracy conquered by his Sons of Horus Legion. Impressed by the Warmaster's offer, the Fabricator General acknowledged the value of the standard template construct database, but sought further assurances. Anticipating this request, Regulus informed Kelbohal that the Warmaster would lift all restrictions on research into forbidden technologies, including abominable intelligence previously deemed off-limits by the Emperor. To solidify the alliance between the Mechanicum and the Warmaster, and to demonstrate the traitors' commitment to their cause, Horus had provided Regulus with the necessary protocols to access the infamous Vaults of Moravec. The Vaults of Moravec housed a trove of forbidden knowledge, sealed by the Emperor 2 centuries earlier after the Treaty of Mars was signed. Within these vaults lay countless artifacts of technology, some tainted by the malevolent influence of chaos, including warp-based weaponry and ancient artificial intelligences known as the Men of Iron. Driven by ambition, the Fabricator General accepted Horus's offer, aligning himself with the Warmaster and committing the full array of humanity's technology to aid the traitors. Once the repository was reopened, it revealed a wealth of arcane knowledge and weaponry, clearly corrupted by chaos. This taint spread rapidly through the forged cities and temples dedicated to the machine god across Mars, manifesting as scrap code, chaos-infested digital source code laced with a malevolent computer virus, that infiltrated the Logistax and Cogitator archives of the Mechanicum. This led to actual chaos emerging within any Cogitator system connected to its compromised counterparts. Though the first acts of betrayal had already unfolded, Fabricator General Kelbahal could not openly declare war against the Emperor without a suitable pretext, one that would silence his critics and eliminate his rivals. Along with his allies among the renegade tech priests, who would later be labelled the Dark Mechanicum by their loyalist opponents, he used the chaos unleashed by the scrap code attack to bide their time and consolidate their forces. Kelbahal and his faction employed sabotage and assassination tactics to remove those unwilling to support their cause. The chance for open warfare eventually arose when the technomagi Coriel Zeth, the mistress of Magma City, openly stated her disbelief in the Omnissiah. This public rejection of the sacred tenets of the cult Mechanicus provided the Dark Mechanicum with the justification they needed to wage war against their enemies, branding them as heretics and apostates to the ancient faith upheld on Mars for millennia. Magma City quickly became a battleground for those within the Mechanicum who remained loyal to the Emperor. Open conflict erupted across the Red Planet, as Martian forces, both civilian and military, engaged in a brutal and escalating civil war known as the Schism of Mars, whose devastation echoed the larger conflict unfolding in the galaxy between loyalist and traitor factions. To assist War Master Horus in realizing his ambitions, Kelbahal supervised the creation of the formidable battleship Furious Abyss within the orbital shipyard at Thule, a repurposed asteroid that the Mechanicum had transported into the orbit of Jupiter in the Sol system, well out of sight from curious eyes and probing questions. This impressive warship stood apart from any other, boasting such extensive armor that it could endure a full-scale assault from a planetary laser defense array. It represented the largest and most powerful vessel ever constructed by humanity, remarkable in every aspect and staggering in its might. Kelbahal approved the building of this vessel to serve his grand vision, specifically the deep-seated desire, or rather the inherent programming, of the machine god's servants to merge with their dormant deity. The Emperor had aimed to impose limitations on the Mechanicum's capacity to explore every path of knowledge that might facilitate a closer connection to the machine god. In contrast, Horus promised to lift all those restrictions and perhaps even unveil new realms of knowledge through his allies among the entities of the Warp. Given such a choice, Kelbahal's allegiance, along with that of the Mechanicum factions loyal to him, required only a fraction of a second for calculation. The Furious Abyss was designed to be the new flagship for the traitorous Word-Bearers Legion, shrouded in secrecy until it was far too late for anyone to act. Measures were put in place to guarantee that its existence would remain hidden. This colossal battleship was built with a singular purpose: the annihilation of an entire Space Marine Legion. The ultimate goal of the Word-Bearers as part of the War Master's grand strategy for conquest was to infiltrate the realm of Ultramar in the eastern fringes of the galaxy and to attempt the destruction of the Ultramarines Legion along with their homeworld, Macragge. In a final act of betrayal, once the Furious Abyss was completed, Kelbahal ordered the destruction of the Jovian shipyards. There was no opportunity for the workers to escape, leaving no survivors in the wake of the devastation. Every tech priest, servitor, and menial present at the yards was reduced to ash. The colossal void ship crafted upon the asteroid's surface would remain undiscovered until it was far too late. The annihilation of Thule resulted in a significant loss of valuable technology, marking a heavy cost for the traitor elements within the Mechanicum to ensure the absolute secrecy needed to fulfill the War Master's plan to obliterate the Ultramarines. Ultimately, however, the Fabricator General's will was enacted, and the Dark Mechanicum played its part in the unfolding tragedy that would soon take place on a world known as Kulth. In addition to the human elements within the traitors' ranks, the power of the Mechanicum and their associates played a crucial role in the war. Among the ranks of what became known as the Dark Mechanicum were influential members of the Martian priesthood, the Ordo Reductor, and the Legio Cybernetica, along with many feared Myrmidon destructor cults and various subcults that had long flirted with tech heresy. All of these factions were united under the leadership of Kelber Hull from Mars. Accompanying them was the support of over half the legios of the Adeptus Titanicus, as well as numerous allied knight houses. Throughout much of the heresy, Mars fell completely under loyalist control, while forge worlds like Saurum, Vos, Cyclothraith, and Styges VIII pledged their loyalty to the traitors, leaving others like Anvilus, Enceladion and Risa caught in the throes of civil war. Similar to Saurum and Cyclothraitha, other renegade forge worlds wary of Mars were enticed by Warmaster Horus into his cause through promises of petty empire building and the freedom to experiment. Horus offered new treaties of alliance that were far more appealing to the ruling Mechanicum synods of these forge worlds than previous agreements. According to this pact, these forge worlds would serve the Warmaster's new Imperium, just as they had the old one. However, instead of being exploited and drained by a master who cared little for their power or prosperity, under Horus they would thrive and be duly rewarded. The restrictions imposed by the Emperor's technological edicts, meant to prevent the horrors of the Old Knight, would be abolished, as would the stifling doctrines of the machine cult, provided they contributed their weapons and war machines to the traitor's cause in abundance. Though the details of this arrangement were complex and intricate to finalize, a clandestine agreement was eventually reached, even as the leaders of these renegade forge worlds continued to engage with the Regent of Terra, Malcador, under the pretense of loyalty. Many Archmagi sought to manipulate both sides until the bitter end. The Dark Mechanicum threw their full support behind Horus at the onset of the Horus heresy, actively participating in assaults against the loyalist Space Marine legions on Istvan V, where they employed dark and forbidden knowledge to help eliminate the loyalist Astartes. Later, under Kelberhull's command, the Dark Mechanicum instigated the devastating civil war known as the Schism of Mars, aiming to reclaim the Mechanicum's autonomy from the Imperium of Man. This effort ultimately failed when Horus was defeated at the Siege of Terra, leading loyalist factions within the Mechanicum to expel their chaos-corrupted brethren from the Red Planet. Many of these heretics from the Dark Mechanicum fled into the Eye of Terror alongside the other traitors after the campaigns of the Great Scouring, during which the Imperium regained most of the territory lost to Horus's forces. Today, the tech priests and dark magi of what is now known as the Dark Mechanicum, viewed as heretics by their counterparts in the cult Mechanicus, have devoted themselves to worshipping the dark gods of chaos. Within the Eye of Terror, they continue to service and maintain the war machines and equipment of the traitor legions and the traitor Titan legions with equal zeal. They delve into the depths of secret and forbidden knowledge concealed by the ruinous powers. Much like their loyalist counterparts, the Dark Mechanicum remains committed to acquiring all knowledge in the universe, believing that their uncorrupted brethren in the Adeptus Mechanicus are misguided. They assert that true comprehension of divinity cannot be achieved while ignoring the secrets offered by the dark gods. The tech adepts of the Dark Mechanicum perceive the Omnissiah of the cult Mechanicus as being represented in the power of chaos, undivided rather than in the Emperor of mankind. Consequently, they pledge themselves to the destruction of the God Emperor, whom they regard as a false prophet leading their fellow tech priests astray. The members of the Adeptus Mechanicus are horrified by what they see as the tech heresy of their chaos counterparts, viewing the Dark Mechanicum's knowledge as a blasphemous affront to the machine god and his Omnissiah, even as they remain ever curious about the activities of their dark brethren. The Adeptus Mechanicus harbours a profound animosity toward the renegade factions among their own ranks that betrayed them during the Horus heresy, traitors who continue to exist today as the Dark Mechanicum. The dark chronicles of those harrowing times reveal the unparalleled destruction inflicted by these traitors on Mars and numerous other battlefronts, leaving an indelible scar on the soul of the Omnissiah's priesthood that has never been cleansed. Following Horus's downfall, many surviving members of the Dark Mechanicum sought refuge with various traitor legions and in the shadowy recesses of the Imperium, where their abhorrent practices have thrived. and their seething hatred for the Imperium has festered throughout the ages. The Dark Mechanicum has been implicated in the use of the forbidden psychosonic weapons of the Emperor's children, the genetic monstrosities created by the infamous Fabius Bile, and the corrupt techno-viral technologies used to engineer the fearsome obliterators. Hellish forge worlds, ruled by cyber-demonic overlords deep within the Eye of Terror, continuously produce the weapons and munitions that arm the forces of chaos and fuel the dreaded Black Crusades. The renegades of the Dark Mechanicum were among the first to be labelled as heretics by the Imperium, and they willingly fled to the Eye of Terror to escape the Imperium's grasp. However, the Eye was not the only refuge available to these heretics seeking to evade Imperial retribution. Despite the vastness of the Imperium, which spans the galaxy from rim to rim, there exist immense regions that remain hidden from the Emperor's light. These areas are known by many names, such as the Outlands, Wilderness Space, and the Halo Stars. In these regions, entire civilizations can rise, thrive, and fall without ever becoming aware of the larger Imperium surrounding them. One such area is the Calixis sector, located at the galaxy's edge, a stronghold of Imperial influence amid the nebulous borders. However, it is encircled by territories not under Imperial control, with the most notable being the Coronus Expanse in the Halo Stars, connected to the Calixis sector by a shifting warp passage. Beyond this passage, Imperial authority wanes, allowing various human and Xeno civilizations to flourish, often unbeknownst to the Imperium. The Calixis sector is surrounded by additional outlands, including the Hazaroth Abyss, the edges of the Drusus Marches, and the nomadic space bridging the Calixis sector and the neighbouring Ixaniad sector. The renegades of the Dark Mechanicum reflect the diversity of the regions they inhabit. Often, heretics manifest as extended clans that share their knowledge solely among their blood relatives, maintaining an understanding of ancient technologies or local warp space conditions that astonishes outsiders. The Adeptus Mechanicus is especially vigilant regarding the existence of such heretics, particularly those belonging to the Meritech clans, and urges other Imperial authorities to act swiftly to capture or eliminate them. While individual renegades sometimes infiltrate Imperial space to engage in their trades, they find it a perilous environment. If caught and identified, they face torture and execution at the hands of the Inquisition, with no chance for mercy. Silent in the Calixian extent are worlds from which the Omnissiah has withdrawn his blessings. They trail their parent stars like errant children struck dumb and blooded. Their ruins are profound, their catacombs endless, their savages sorrowful, for these wards of the Imperium of mankind have paid a great and terrible price for the tech heresy of their forebearers. Warus the Secondmost, Indexus Astrae Calixis. Beyond the understanding of ordinary mortals lies a realm inhabited by the servants of chaos, a demon world that straddles the line between the material universe and the warp. In this place, the natural laws and rational thought have been entirely overthrown by the caprices of the ruinous powers. On these demon worlds, demons roam freely, drawing sustenance from the swirling currents of sorcery, while mortals become mere playthings, valued only as chaos champions or slaves. These realms serve as a refuge for those worshipping chaos who possess the means and courage to escape to them. Despite the relentless efforts of the Inquisition to root out the followers of the dark gods, the pervasive nature of a demon world makes it nearly impervious to their reach. Some demon worlds are ruled by remnants of the Dark Mechanicum that once pledged loyalty to Horus. These hell-forged worlds are completely devoted to demon machines and infernal industries, where flesh is ground and suffering becomes the currency for manifesting the horrific visions of their nightmarish overlords. Countless individuals are enslaved within a sprawling network of twisted forges, producing an unending supply of weapons and munitions to fuel the traitor legions in their long war against the Imperium. The rulers of these Dark Mechanicum Hellforge worlds, now mostly transformed into half-demonic machines, have long forsaken their humanity and owe allegiance to no one, neither mortals nor chaos gods. They barter their unholy creations and weaponry to the highest bidder, be it a warlord, demagogue, chaos sorcerer, or demon prince, and their currency is invariably the same: new raw materials, flesh and souls of slaves to sate the insatiable appetite of the dark forge worlds. These forsaken forge worlds are perpetually shrouded in a thick blanket of dark grey clouds. Below, towering stacks of vertical pipes spew thick, toxic smoke into the acrid air, obscuring any view of the actual surface, which is completely blanketed by layers of factories that churn and forge ceaselessly day and night, though few can tell the difference in the perpetual twilight. Robed figures scurry about purposefully, their exposed clothing revealing glimpses of intricate mechadendrites or metallic limbs. A closer look reveals the true nature of these dark realms. The symbols of the ruinous powers are evident everywhere. Runes and glyphs of sinister significance decorate the walls, proclaiming allegiance to the dark gods. The heretics themselves bear these marks on their branded flesh, their ties to the machine god burned away from their very being. The forges emit the grotesque odours of burning blood and charred flesh, sustained by both souls and industrial fuels like promethium and low-gravity alloys. Gone is the revered cog Mechanicum. Instead, leering metal skulls encircled by jagged teeth serve as a perverse mockery. The most unsettling aspect is the chaotic nature of the world itself. Forged cities rise haphazardly, thrusting skyward and delving deep into the planet's crust at the whim of their dark magi lords. Lacking a central authority or unified belief system due to their split from the Imperium, these fallen tech priests have adopted a diverse ideology that starkly contrasts with their former colleagues in the Adeptus Mechanicus. Heretics might reject the Omnissiah as a false deity, revere him as a manifestation of chaos, or simply abandon their former beliefs to pursue their research. Even among the relatively open-minded explorators of the Adeptus Mechanicus, there are subjects that must be avoided to remain faithful to the machine god's teachings. A heretic gleefully flouts these restrictions, delving into Xenos technology, archaeotech from the dark age of technology, and experimenting with all forms of warp manipulation. They may even audaciously create entirely new technologies, combining components in forbidden ways to achieve what many in the cult Mechanicus would label the ultimate tech heresy, innovation. In their pursuit of knowledge, a heretic may share their tools and secrets with those untrained in the mysteries of the machine god, actively seeking out new technology and continually experimenting with previously forbidden techniques. No longer do they believe that any information, experiment, or device should be disregarded. Instead, they intentionally focus on those technologies that the Mechanicus once cautioned against, particularly with a keen interest in developing warp-based innovations. Few inquiries into technology escape the curiosity of a heretic, yet many of his inventions and research efforts inevitably gravitate towards crafting instruments of destruction. As he forges these weapons for his fellow worshippers, the heretic frequently undergoes a transformation of his own body. It's likely that he possesses few organic components, and those remaining are often marked by the chaotic gifts bestowed by the chaos gods. His cybernetic and occasionally biological modifications not only enhance his technical prowess, but also bestow him with formidable combat abilities. A heretic is typically much more physically resilient and heavily armed than even the most esteemed magos of the Mechanicus. In the eyes of some within the Imperium, those labelled as heretics are perceived as a cohesive entity, akin to the Adeptus Mechanicus itself. This perception is misguided, as no galaxy-spanning organization dedicated to tech heresy exists, including the Dark Mechanicum, which is often mistakenly viewed as a singular monolithic faction, like the Mechanicus from which it split. Instead, countless fiefdoms and dark forge worlds exist, each presided over by a powerful fallen magos, or multiple magi, capable of commanding their peers and enslaving Mechanicum thralls and servants. Much like the warbands of the traitor legions and other servants of chaos, these corrupt tech priests frequently engage in conflict with one another, or prefer to remain isolated from their fellow devotees of the dark gods. Heretics typically embrace a path of relentless innovation. They may harness power for their devices directly from the warp, controlling them through summoned warp entities. Some dabble in concepts like artificial general intelligence, memory transference, or even attempt to capture and preserve the souls of sentient beings within their creations, drawing on their arcane knowledge of the warp. Many of these inventors blindly adhere to the notion that the new and the novel always surpass established methods in achieving their goals. For them, the thrill of a fresh idea or the rediscovery of obscure knowledge is a victory, even if that idea has been rendered obsolete. With each advancement, their fervour for further discoveries intensifies, along with their insatiable thirst for knowledge, regardless of its origins. Driven by their relentless quest for understanding, heretics are often willing to leverage the ruinous powers and their demonic servants as sources of inspiration. At times they actively seek out Xenos technology and archaeotech, even coordinating raids on imperial strongholds to reclaim records detailing the locations of such devices. In the minds of many heretics there exists no greater calling than to serve the advancement of technology and knowledge. Any sacrifice is deemed acceptable in the pursuit of this ambition. It is relatively uncommon for a heretic to be elevated by the dark gods as a demon prince. More frequently, they become part of their own inventions, leaving little of their original body or personality intact to merit such a reward. However, those few fortunate enough to receive this honor continue to disseminate their chaos-tainted technology throughout the galaxy. The regulations and commands imposed by the Adeptus Mechanicus are extensive and severe, creating a complex and rigid code that governs every facet of the lives of the Omnissiah's priesthood, shaping their beliefs and practices. Their mission is straightforward, yet steadfast: to manage and restrict knowledge and its application, suppress any heretical innovations, and, above all, maintain the cult Mechanicus's dominance over the Imperium's technological realm. To embody the essence of a heretic savant in its truest form is to forsake this code, at least in the tech priest's innermost thoughts. It entails embracing personal creativity, experimentation, and autonomy, deviating from the path dictated by the teachings of the Archmagos doctrinal. For a tech priest to pursue such a course is as rare and radical as a confessor of the Adeptus Ministorum straying from the imperial creed, with consequences as severe for those whose deviations are uncovered. Rather than facing a fiery pyre, heretic savants may find themselves subjected to having their cybernetic enhancements violently extracted while still alive, with any remaining flesh deemed useful repurposed into servitor components as penance for their transgressions against the machine god. Heretic savants may arrive at their renegade status for various reasons, the most common being a desire to exercise their free will outside the confines of the machine god's rigid domains. This tech heresy is especially common among those tech priests serving in explorator cadres or assigned to the Inquisition. While the need for self-reliance and forced adaptation in the field can reinforce the omniscient faith for some, others find themselves increasingly questioning established doctrines, innovating to overcome challenges and seeking their own solutions. Still, some are drawn to tech heresy for darker motives, driven by personal ambition and an obsessive pursuit of power and knowledge, leading them to rebel against the stringent limits imposed by the cult Mechanicus. Regardless of the motivations, the journey into tech heresy is fraught with danger, akin to meddling with the powers of the warp. Exposure to alien artifacts and the technological sins of humanity's past can be equally corrupting for both body and spirit. For heretic savants, secrecy is paramount, as their knowledge and actions, if revealed, would result in condemnation from the Imperium. Such revelations would invite retribution from the cult Mechanicus. This necessity often drives them to isolate themselves from their peers and fosters a deep-seated paranoia about being discovered. Consequently, heretic savants develop a ruthless and suspicious mindset centered around self-preservation, increasingly opting to implant, often heretical weaponry and defensive systems, into their own bodies, pursuing the quest for knowledge without hesitation. Becoming a heretic savant is more about choice and opportunity than initiation into a clandestine cult or servitude to a master. It requires the tech priest to renounce the sacred doctrines of the Omnissiah and possess the will and capability to do so. From that moment forward, they risk censure and annihilation at the hands of the cult Mechanicus if their heresies are unveiled. While nothing impedes their advancement within the Adeptus Mechanicus, they become forever false-hearted and must remain eternally vigilant. In the depths of the Eye of Terror and across many regions of the Halo Stars, there are those who reject the rules and customs of the Adeptus Mechanicus, opting instead to delve into technology and seek understanding of its mechanics without the approval of the cult Mechanicus. Labeled as techno-heretics or heretics, these individuals face relentless persecution for their sacrilegious activities, and they receive no mercy if apprehended. To ensure their safety and further their forbidden studies, many of these heretics band together for mutual support. They often turn to pirates and smugglers, whose services provide them with the freedom and mobility necessary to evade the watchful eyes of the Mechanicus and to engage with advanced machinery away from scrutiny. Over time, certain heretics have emerged in the Coronus Expanse, their notorious deeds giving rise to chilling legends. These dark reputations have led the lowborn communities, from Footfall to Damaris, to collectively refer to a particularly skilled and infamous fallen tech priest as an arch-heretic. While there are no established standards defining an arch-heretic, they frequently possess an understanding and mastery of machinery that rivals that of genuine tech priests and explorators. Many of the most formidable arch-heretics were once devoted tech priests who have since renounced their worship of the Omnissiah. Their expertise in technology and unique abilities make them highly sought after by spacefaring criminals. There are several notable cults in the Dark Mechanicum Society. In the year 550th of the 37th millennium, during a grim chapter for the Imperium known as the Ecclusiad War, the northwestern edge of the galaxy suffered under the onslaught of a heretic cult called the Apostles of the Blind King. This sinister faction viewed organic humanity as an affront to the machine god. The Apostles unearthed incredible relics from the dark age of technology, granting them the ability to create supernovae from the hearts of living stars. As they purged the outer segmentum obscurus, constellations were irrevocably altered. The conflict raged for a decade until navigator Joira Macran located the hidden palace warship of the Blind King within a fold of warp space. Armed with this knowledge, Macran directed the Emperor-class battleship Dominus Astra to the palace's coordinates. The Blind King met his end when the ship's lance batteries breached the palace warship's hull. Without their leader's warp-given foresight, the Apostles were swiftly defeated and eradicated. The Children of Rhine are a heretic cult that emerged alongside the spread of the Levelist heresy, championed by the infamous arch-heretic Nomen Rhine, whom they now revere as a saint. Through his creation of constructs known as false men, machines designed to mimic heavily augmented tech priests, the children believe these beings deliver messages and innovative tech patterns directly from Nomen Rhine himself. Operating within the Calixis sector of the Segmentum Obscurus, the Empiric Engineers represent a splinter faction of the Mechanicus. They utilize a variety of devices to turn the warp against itself, obliterating demons that intrude upon their work. Vast warp machines reside in their concealed strongholds, harnessing the essence of the Empyrean and capturing it in null-field containment units for research. Those Empiric Engineers who infuse their machinery with warp energies usually maintain their sanity, at least initially. This heretic group is notorious for creating the Immateria Ward, a type of null-field projector and machine spirit cogitation core intended for use in armor, portable shield walls, and other equipment. Understanding the dangers posed by the corrosive energies of the warp, they delve into heretical archaeotech lore to develop machine spirits capable of channeling these forces. The Empiric Engineers have long distributed Immateria wards to their allies in exchange for their loyalty, requiring them to embrace dark tech. Consequently, the ward sigil has become a loathed emblem among loyalist Mechanicus factions, like the militant members of the cult of Solix, whose Magi direct Auxilia Myrmidon hunter cohorts to hunt down those marked by the heretic Empiric Engineers. Simply associating with the owner of an Immateria ward invites a swift death from the machine cult's enforcers, or worse, a grim fate tied to the interrogation devices of a Magos militant. The Logicians represent an alliance of heretic factions that have long posed a challenge to the Calixis and neighbouring Ixaniad sectors. They are not centred around a singular figure or creed, but draw inspiration from a forbidden text entitled In Defence of the Future, a logical discourse. This book has been banned for millennia. Identified as a progressive cult, the Logicians advocate for humanity's advancement through technological progress, seeking to overthrow the oppressive grip of the Adeptus Ministorum and the High Lords of Terror, while dismantling the suffocating constraints imposed by the Adeptus Mechanicus. Their ultimate goal is to revive the legendary power of the Dark Age of technology. By leveraging a covert network of ruthless mercantile interests and ambitious nobles, the Logicians serve as a haven for heretics and rogue tech priests. They are well organized and resourceful. Although they lack a demonic agenda, the Logicians are incredibly dangerous, exhibiting a chilling disregard for anything in their relentless pursuit of power and superior weapons. The Maligrisian heretics form a cult of followers devoted to the notorious renegade Magos Umbra Maligris, who led a pervasive and insidious sect flourishing in the Malfian subsector of the Calixis sector during the 6th century of 41st millennium. Ultimately, the renegade was located and eliminated in a bloody confrontation with a combined inquisitorial Mechanicus purgation force. Although his research has been severely suppressed, the law of Maligris endures, particularly among those tech priests tasked with hunting down rebellious members of the Mechanicus. This mirrors the efforts of the more radical factions of the Inquisition, who seek to weaponize the tools of the archenemy against its adherents, risking their own destruction in the process. Some Maligrisian heretics, later expelled from the foundries of Port Roth, practiced a form of mutational bioforging on their workers, enhancing their output while exerting total control over them. Despite the dire repercussions of this bioforging failing, the allure of remade bodies continues to tempt the wealthy and powerful, both for their chosen servants and themselves. The secrets of this blasphemous technology have spread to several worlds across the sector, despite being condemned by both the Inquisition and the Mechanicus. This heretic cult comprises the corrupt followers of arch-heretic Amicus Tola, who rules the decaying world of Xenophia in the Calixis sector. To most, Amicus Tola is a mere whisper, a distant and elusive lord of tech heresy. His cult has significantly impacted Xenophia, spreading its corruption among the impoverished and villainous. The planet is in decline, its civil structures crumbling, and its former glory fading. Towering ruins overshadow squabbling noble courts and a disillusioned imperial caste. The Xenophian machine cult is as degraded as the manufactories and spires it once upheld, plagued by a mix of chaotic beliefs and malfunctioning neuroaugmetics that would horrify any Forge World tech adept. One of Umbra Maligris's many abominations was the creation of the apostic matrix, electrostaves that can scourge the mind and soul with occult energies, dismantling the foundations of faith and loyalty. Some radical inquisitors have discovered the apostic matrix to be a valuable tool for interrogation, taking great pleasure in deploying this instrument of the archenemy on the corrupted souls of heretics.